Howdy, I'm Kate Kavanaugh, and you're listening to the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast, where we're laying the groundwork for our land, ourselves, and for generations to come by looking at the way every thread of life is connected to one another. Communities above ground mirror the communities below the soil, which mirror the vast community of the cosmos. As the saying goes, as above, so below. Join me as we take a curious journey into agriculture, biology, history, spirituality, health, and so much more. I can't wait to unearth all of these incredible topics alongside you. Hello, and welcome to the Groundwork podcast that is ever so slowly transitioning from the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast as I just take my sweet time with this. I am your host, Kate Kavanaugh, and I am here to explore the threads of what it means to be humans woven into this earth with you. This week's guest is incredibly special to me, both because she has been my sounding board, a source of inspiration and leadership, a muse, and just a friend that redefined what friendship meant for me. Her name is Kate Havstad-Cassad, and this is her second go-around on this podcast. I will link to our first episode together in the show notes. I caught up with Kate on the week of her launch of her Keep On Growing campaign, inspired by the incredible artist Nikki Bloom, for her regenerative leather bag brand Range Revolution. Now, I am such a fan of what Kate is doing, and you're going to hear about this in the episode, but over 5 million hides are either thrown away or incinerated, and Kate is working to rebuild and build a regenerative leather supply chain, starting with Range Revolution, her brand. And for those of you that have been listening a while, you will have heard a quote come up quite often in these episodes as I explore supply chains, some of the economic policies that shifted manufacturing here in America and abroad, as I've explored shipping, and all of these other externalities of how our modern world works. It's a quote from David Graeber where he says, "The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make and could just as easily make differently." I've really taken this to heart as I've explored some, and I'm going to continue to explore some, how this world was made. I think that so often we toss that question out there, how did we get here? And I want to take an honest stab at answering that really big question, to look at the influences that brought us here in the manufacture of clothing or of farming or of all of these different spaces in the world. But the other side of that coin is looking at how we might remake and reimagine our world. And this episode with Kate is going to kick off a series with people that I really believe are doing the work to reimagine these systems that we feel like have become so entrenched, but are not in fact inevitable. And I think that Kate absolutely exemplifies this with her work with Range Revolution, with Cassad Family Farms, and with Havstad Hat Company. She is an absolute force of nature, and her words always just rattle around in my bones for weeks after I hear them. She has a way of instilling hope and instilling ideas of what is possible and being just an incredible inspiration for how she lives both her business life, and Kate is a force in this realm. She's taught me a lot about what it means to seek funding and to reimagine how businesses get funded. And she has taught me a lot also about how to think about circularity and farming and fashion and leather in all of these different places. I really can't begin to tell you what an inspiration she's been to me. And I really do think that this woman is reimagining our world in so many different ways. And I'm really excited to bring you this series, The Two Sides of Each Coin, some of which we've explored with the episode with Rachel Slade around making it in America and American manufacturing and some of the economic policies that resulted in offshoring. We explored some around shipping and all of these different pieces, but really is the question, right? How do we remake this world? And the knowledge that it is not inevitable and that people are doing this incredible work. And Kate is absolutely one of those people. I keep my Range Revolution bag behind my desk to just kind of serve as a touchstone for what might be possible. This is our second week with a sponsored episode, and I also have included a link in the show notes to Range Revolution, and I do make a small commission. It doesn't change the price to you from that link. And so if you're inspired and motivated to buy something from Range, by using that link, you support both Kate and myself and this podcast, which is not free to produce. And that's why we have some incredible sponsors this week, and you'll hear from them, and hopefully you'll hear that I've worked to really intertwine them into the story that Kate is telling around simplicity. And I want to give a huge thanks to both Redmond Real Salt for sponsoring this episode and Sundry's Farm Garlic, and Kate and I's friends, Rob Croffel and Jillian Lakuski. I just feel really full as I say those words. Full because I feel for the first time in a long time in this podcast a sense of really deep support. And I am just so excited about where we're going and the connections and the relationships that are being built along the way. And I think that in a time where every corner of the internet seems to be heavy and full of a sense of despair, that there is something really important about building the work of hope, of reimagining, and coming back to that idea of David Graeber's, right? That the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make and could just as easily make differently. So thank you, dear listeners, for imagining how we might make this world differently with me, and through supporting this podcast, through your listenership and your kind messages and ratings and reviews, which is a great way to support the podcast for free. And I just really appreciate you being here, and I can't wait for you to hear these words from Kate Havstad-Cassad. And so let's dive in. Cover some about the history of leather too, like our relationship with leather, if we think about leather a little bit.
That's such a great place to start.
I want to start there, but the first thing I actually want to say, because, and I've told you this before, I keep my Range bag behind my desk when I'm not using it, and on the farm. It hangs out here, and I use it as this little touchstone for how we might reimagine our world and supply chains and all of these different pieces. But as we talked about doing this interview, I thought a lot about bags themselves as a part of what we are carrying that is the most precious to us. Mm. And I couldn't help but think about all the millennia that we have, what we put inside of a bag would have been those things that were closest to our hearts. And then to create this bag out of regeneratively raised traceable hides and to build this supply chain, this is also an echo of what is precious. It is the land that carries these animals. It is the animals themselves. It is the people who move these animals and touch these animals and these hides. And so there's something there, and I tried to define it this morning and I couldn't quite get there, but just about what we are carrying forward into the future, about what we are packing that is most precious to us in these bags.
Yeah. I'm like literally writing this down because what we carry with us. Um, every day so we set up a little warehouse here on our farm, which is where I'm packing and shipping things out right now. And so every order that's going out, my hands are touching. And this is, at quintessential startup, this is what we need to do right now. It's also very important for me to touch this stuff a lot right now in this early stage because every piece, I'm looking at the leathers, I'm looking at the finish and the sewing. But every time I pack one of these, I am like giddy with how proud I am of this beautiful thing we've created out of
Mm.
nothing. And knowing that these pieces are going to go into somebody's hand, they're going to touch this every day and interact with it every day. Like the journal, you're going to put your like most precious thoughts and reflections and reminders in here. That bag, you're going to pack everything it is that you choose to carry with you. And,
Yeah.
um, I'm a sucker for this sort of looking at these things like talismans. It's part of why I fell in love with hats. And, that which a hat is also that which this precious bag is. Um,
Mm.
and I'm really excited about what we've created and both in the product line, but also an opportunity for other people to experience what it's like to hold something like that and feel that it's about something so much bigger than us as individuals.
Yes. That you're touching all of the hands that move this to you. And I was thinking about you and Chris in the warehouse, and I was thinking, I know that in that episode with Cole Mannix, we both really loved the bit that he said about a river seeming maybe more inefficient than something like an irrigation ditch, but that it's really an efficiency. And I was thinking about you touching the hides, touching the bags, going through the ministrations of being a startup where your hands are touching it too many times. And yet, this isn't an inefficiency in the
Mhm,
same way that the way that we go out and check on our animals isn't an inefficiency. The way that we touch the soil isn't an inefficiency. That this is a part of building something old anew.
mm, yep. And, what we're referencing that if you think about the utility of an irrigation ditch, it does what it needs to do. It gets resource from A to B as quickly as uninterrupted as possible, and it does that job well. And yet, in an irrigation ditch, it is not a very
Mm.
hospitable environment for life to grow and thrive. It would be a problem
Mm.
actually if there was, you know, um, too much algae, if there's, too much fish that's being sucked out into your pumps, things like that. Like that doesn't work in an irrigation ditch. A stream and all of
Mm.
its inefficiencies, all of those little outcroppings and cool pools, which allow fish, to reproduce and it allows water to cool down. Like that is where life thrives, and those inefficiencies are, um, the marrow. And I've done this twice now with two businesses. I did this with Have Said Hat Co. I did it with Casad Family Farms for those early years when we were actually Juniper Jungle Farm. And now I'm doing it again with Range. And this is like a dream come true because I get to bring together the two sides of design and storytelling style, which has been with humans since forever. I want to talk about this museum exhibit I went and saw in London. Um, but and then it conjoins it with really what is the marrow for me of like I feel like my purpose here too, which is advocacy for rebuilding of agriculture in America, and to join these two parallel career paths into Range Revolution, which is an intersection of those two paths. I'm doing it again, and it's inefficient in that I am touching every single hide here in the beginning, and I'm learning about what challenges we're going to be facing to rebuild the supply chain, what infrastructure we're going to need to help the processors and slaughterhouses get in order to provide us the end leather kind of material we're going to need, what relationships we have to develop to make this symbiotic and work for everybody. Um, it's super hands-on and inefficient, but it's critical in the beginning, and then we work towards efficiencies.
I didn't anticipate this when I brought up the inefficiencies, but as you were explaining sort of the difference, and you did it really beautifully, between an irrigation ditch and what a stream might do, I thought a lot about how supply chains have changed, right? That could be an almost perfect metaphor for supply chains, that in globalization, in the race to the bottom and the race for profitability, we've seen supply chains really mm, become leaner, become more quote unquote efficient and less hospitable to life, less hospitable to communities, to humans, to the environment in the way that they've gone, and what it means to rebuild a supply chain where you're thinking about the life that can be nurtured within that, the land and environment, the social communities and economies, the people who are working for this, that there's something really perfect about that for me. And so I want to back up, and I kind of want to start at the beginning, and I want to talk about hides and where they're going now, and maybe how we got to this place where we're throwing away 5 million hides plus per year, and where hides are coming from. And so what range is building in that.
So, hides for the last couple of decades have lost so much of their value in America as our supply chain has globalized.
Yeah.
And
I want to talk about what it means to keep it simple with food. I've been a chef, I've cooked for people, but mostly I think of myself as someone who cooks at home a lot. And for me, two things are necessary for that to be sustainable: that it's simple and that it's delicious. That's why sitting on my counter in a big crock and in small dishes in every table in the house is Redmond Real Salt. Salt is flavor and nutrition both. Redmond salt comes direct from mine to table out of an ancient seabed in Utah. A seabed that formed before all of our plastics and pollutants and left behind 60 plus trace minerals that make Redmond great. The flavor of Redmond is unlike any other salt. It's complex, earthy, and maybe even just a touch sweet. And it's usually the only thing I use to season my food. I buy big 25-pound bags, so I'll always have it on hand, and you can choose if you want kosher, coarse, or fine to bring out all the flavors of all the food grown in your local food shed. It both enhances and adds flavor and nutrition. Our bodies need salt to fuel our muscles and cellular processes as much as to delight our taste buds. You can order bulk bags of salt or shakers or their incredible Relight hydration powder and so much more by going to redmond.life and using the code mindbodysoil_15 for 15% off. Again, if you just go to redmond.life and use the code mindbodysoil_15 for 15% off, or hit the link in the show notes, you can get all of your simple cooking salt needs. Kate and I have done a fair share of cooking together, and we really believe a little salt can be the key to ease and flavor in your food. So I want to leave you with something she says in this episode that sums up why I love the pairing of good mine-to-table salt with some good farm-to-table food. She says, and that is what luxury has kind of come to mean in a way, right? Is perfection, homogenization, and exclusivity. Aspirational things. I would love it if there was a remembering of what is truly luxurious. Something that is steeped in story and terroir and character, like the food we eat. We don't really mess around with a bunch of fancy things. We let the quality of the food shine in and of itself, and it's prepared in quite a simple way, but it's so amazing because it's been born of healthy soils and healthy places. I couldn't agree more, and that's why I love selecting food like that and then flavoring it simply with something like Redmond's Real Salt. Let's get back to our interview with Kate. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Kate.
I just have I pulled this little statistic, and I don't know if it's precise, but I pulled a statistic about tanneries in the United States. That in 1750, there were 4,000 tanneries. In 1810, 8,000. And over 11,000 establishments operated in 1850 for shoemakers, that there were 3,500 saddlers and harness makers in 1850. And I doubt we have, and you probably know a little bit closer, I doubt we have 200 tanneries in the United States today.
Yes, less. And, if you're then searching for a tannery which might provide veg tan, which is what we're seeking to do, it's a more natural, less toxic, and frankly, I think more beautiful finish on these hides. That's even less. This runs parallel. I was trying to pull up this exact number. Okay, here it is. Agriculture Secretary Vilsack, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, it's Tom Vilsack, yeah.
He just made a statement about how since 1981, we have lost 544,000 farms in America.
Whoa.
That's 544,000 farms. That's a lot of acreage. That's a huge consolidation. And same in the leather industry. The supply chains for hides, the supply chains for beef processing, it's all consolidated. So it's all wrapped up in itself. So, ultimately what started to lead me here to this work with hides is ultimately our work here on the farm and the ranch. Our lack of processing options has been a huge challenge for us and all farmers and ranchers. That consolidation, the disappearance of the processors, the disappearance of the tanneries, the disappearance of aggregators, it's led to this waste dilemma where 5 million cattle hides a year are thrown into the trash or incinerated. That concept of waste, like consolidation, it's the irrigation ditch. They've consolidated for this level of efficiency, and they've killed like the life-giving pools that make our communities and rural areas alive. And so our generation is living through this, and it happened, insidiously since the 1980s. It's not that long ago that we've lost so much. That's quick. And so it is our generation that is tasked with rebuilding. And I went and saw Robin Wall Kimmerer speak, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass.
Yeah.
And she told this great story at the end that I come back to when we're talking about the problem. So we're at this stage in the hero's journey where we've identified problem, and we're going to get to like solution. But her story was that one of her students was like, there's never been a greater time to be alive as somebody who cares so deeply about the well-being of this planet and the well-being of our communities. And Robin Wall Kimmerer was kind of like thrown off, like, man, from my stance, sometimes things look pretty bleak. And the student was like, yes, but it's like that old cartoon of like the Wile E. Coyote who is like running so fast and coming up on this edge and ends up, teetering on this like plank over some huge ravine. And she's like, we're the coyote. Like, we're teetering on this very precarious plank and edge. And it's never mattered more where we stand. So I loved that perspective because when we look at the scope of these consolidations, when we look at the scope of these problems, the scope of the waste streams, so big. But what an incredible time to be here, because it matters more than ever where we stand. And so that is what is kind of anchoring me in this work with range, because it is tangential, to everything we're talking about with food systems, with rural economies, with a future where people might feel more connected to land.
Yes. And I think I'm making sure that I take time to sort of both picture, and I have an almost embodied sensation of being that coyote teetering on the edge. That this is part of what we have been given to carry, to speak to carrying. This is part of what we have been given to carry. We've inherited it. It's maybe not it's not the most exciting baggage, but it is an opportunity to reimagine and to think about how we might build this differently, and to weave in new and old, and to mend and repair and go forward, to carry something very different forward.
You're starting to dive into this in so many different ways. It does come back to the reimagination. It really is. What was that great Grayberg quote that you pulled
Let
out?
me pull it, because I think I say it in 90% of episodes that
You're saying maybe every day.
because it just
Do you want me to
the
read it?
ultimate. Yeah. Do it.
The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make and could just as easily be made differently. And now, look, you and I are realists. You can't just visualize said repair of infrastructure. But it does first have to begin in your mind of dreaming as to what the reimagination looks like. And then, dreaming up the plans and dreaming up the community that you're going to need to do it. And I'll say we're in an interesting time. A lot of our peers are stepping into, big unknowns, trying to address this stuff. And I won't, share anybody's news that's there to share, but it's just in the last few months, even, there's been multiple friends, that are taking the work that they've been doing, and they're starting to reinvest it in these new ways that kind of address recreating these hubs in rural communities and reconnecting supply chains. So, I feel nothing but hope right now when it comes to our capacity to reimagine. We are that coyote, and the opportunity is right there, but it's taking a lot of faith, and it's taking, a lot of resilience.
Yes. I mean, I think there's this aspect of that. This is going to be hard. Not wanting to sugarcoat this, that this is not easy work, but it is important work. And I want to tug at reimagining an entire supply chain for leather. Like, I don't want to lose that, but I also want to weave into this thread of thinking bigger, because I think, some of the peers that you're talking about, and we have to dream bigger, think bigger to address these solutions. And you really exemplify that for me. And I'll come back to, I keep my Range Revolution bag behind my desk because it reminds me to think bigger and to think more joyfully and more beautifully about this world that we are tasked with reimagining. This episode with Kate has me thinking about our hands and what they make, craft, and tend to. About what it means to consider the hands that touch something many times before it reaches your home. This is why I love Sundry's Farm for my culinary and seed starter garlic. Rob Kropfel and Jillian Lakuski, friends of both Kate and myself, alongside their daughter and dogs and horses and the rest of their farm, hand grow hard and soft neck varietals of garlic without herbicides or pesticides and certified white rot free on Sundry's farm in the Hagerman Valley of Idaho. This garlic is tended with care, touched over 8 times as it is planted, weeded, scapes harvested, picked, dried, and shipped to your doorstep. The best part? It's hands down the most delicious garlic I've ever tasted. With varietals like Enchilium Red, Nootka Rose, and so many more, it brings the spice, heat, and earth to my kitchen throughout the year. It makes cooking flavorful food simple and easy with nice big and easy to peel cloves. Explore a wide range of varietals and grab bags for both planting and culinary needs by going to sundriesfarm.com. That's SUNDRIESFARM.com to pre-order seed and culinary garlic for the year with shipping beginning in September. Again, just go to sundriesfarm.com and find all of your garlic needs taken care of.
Thanks for using the word joyful. It's been one that I'm trying to keep anchored in this work, because if what I truly seek is to, like, through all this work, trying to bring more joy to agriculture, like, we have to be it. And that is a part of the reimagining. We can build these more joyful and beautiful products, which then build more joyful and beautiful rural communities, job opportunities, more beautiful places and ecosystems through how we design at the outset. And the joy can be felt, and I want that for agriculture. Agriculture has been in a tough spot since the 80s, starting with the farm crisis, and that was a start of a major amount of consolidation, and it's only kind of continued since then. And it's heavy work, right, that we're doing, but the only, the way that we, I think, build these more holistic businesses is if we take this very heavy work and we make sure that we keep the joy as a center pillar of it as much as is possible. So I'm attempting to do that.
I love that. And I've heard, in our conversations, I've heard you say this, and I think it's a reminder that some of this, agriculture has been a heavy space. We've been navigating heavy times. But we have to re-infuse it with joy, and there has to be the joy of doing it and the joy in the connecting of it. And I think that's part of coming back to these human scales of community and of things passing between hands, because I think that is a part of that human joy too.
Yeah, the tangible, like, we can enjoy this, like, there can be this tangible enjoyment. And to bring this back to where we kind of meant to start, which is like the history of leather, like, to love and appreciate leather for what it is, like, we need a little bit of a re-education. Like, meat has needed this moment of, we swung so far in one direction in an effort to be more eco-conscious, we totally lost the plot. And meat is having a little bit of this moment in renaissance. And in my journey the last 2 years of building Range Revolution, going to trade shows, going to these sustainable fashion summits, I am quite surprised at where the thinking is still at in fashion, which is that leather is the problem and these new bioengineered alt materials are the solution. And it's like they've lost the plot. They're not seeing the forest through the trees, because the real problem is waste. The real problem is consumption. The real problem is consolidation. The problem is not natural materials that are being thrown into the trash right now. That's not the problem. But we keep creating new solutions, like innovating, like that's the answer. And So leather, it's this project requires re-education, and we got to make it fun and joyful and beautiful to help people reconnect to what it means to have, um, natural materials filling their closet. Just like we need people to have reimagined what goes on their plate and reestablishing relationships with their farmers and buying food in a more thoughtful way. That's happening right now in fashion, but very slow.
I want to make this really tangible for people because this really stuck with me. And this was some number of years ago. It was maybe like 2.5 years ago that you went out to London for a textile convention of some sort. And you went out there when Range Revolution was, I think, pretty young, and we're showcasing this leather and people's response. And I want you to talk about that. And I also kind of want to draw this comparison that when we're talking about leather versus synthetic leather imitators, it reminds me a lot of talking about an Impossible Burger versus a meat burger. Here you have this thing that has this whole list of ingredients and externalities versus a single ingredient piece. And so I wonder if you might take us back to that convention, because I think it really illustrates it really well. And then I have a little quote from you about this too.
Yeah, that was summer of 2021 or 2022. I think it was 2022. And Heston was a little babe. Um, and it was the Future Fabrics Expo in London. And it is the best, I think, kind of curated textile show for sustainability and fashion. And they've done an incredible job of aggregating all these different options. And the idea is Nina Conrad, Nina, I'm forgetting her last name, Nina, who started it, like her vision was, there's no more excuses because you can walk into this trade show and you can find anything that you need to design your collection. And it's a better option, than the polyesters and the nylons.
Yeah,
Um,
these petroleum-based products. I just want to remind us of that these are petroleum-based products.
yes, the oil that we have had rebranded to us as our
Yes.
new wardrobe.
Yes.
Um, so at this show, Range was very young. Really, I just think I had the first couple samples of finished bags and was showcasing it. And at the show, there's a huge emphasis on bioengineered kind of new alt materials.
Mhm.
Some are very cool dealing with waste, like banana waste. And they're making incredible, out of that.
Interesting.
Hemp products, organic cotton options, not very much leather representation, but a lot of like alt experimental pilot materials for synthetic options of leathers. And this woman came up to me and she was feeling our bag and she was like, "Oh my God, wow, this is incredible." And I was like, "Thank you. I know this like really beautiful veg tan leather." And she was like, "What is it made out of?" And I was like, "Well, it's leather. It's a cattle hide." And she literally like kind of and like dropped the bag back on its little podium and was like, there was a feeling like a look of disgust on her face. And she was like, "It's real leather." And I was like, "Yeah, but and I told her the whole regenerative story of how these are sourced from ranches that are proving through ecological monitoring that they're increasing biodiversity, they're increasing water holding capacity. Um, they have the potential to store carbon on these rangelands. And this is a waste product, which we have vegetable tanned in the most natural way possible." And still, though, it was, she had a certain understanding and had been indoctrinated in a certain way to see that as some sort of like um, evil.
Yeah.
And it shocked me, but it was the start of actually seeing the polarities of thinking of where some people are at, and there's interesting geographic differences about opinions on hides and leather. But that was a shocking and an important moment for me to be a part of, to
Yeah.
understand what level of re-education and reconnection is going to have to happen for them to see what I've had the great fortune to see, which is
Mm.
real life, what holistic management of cattle can do in an arid landscape, through the toughest of climate change conditions. And I'm seeing the incredible beauty that it can produce. These people just haven't seen that yet. So I have nothing but understanding and compassion when people are there. And hopefully the storytelling that we do helps lift more people, like just lift their eyes up, you know?
Yeah. I just want to give people a picture before we carry on of where hides and leather are coming from now. So we have 5 million hides that are going into landfills or being incinerated. Where is the majority of leather being sourced from?
So primary aggregation is happening in Brazil, in New Zealand, and in China. Um, that is where commodity leather supply chains are sourcing from. The Brazilian hide market is huge. JBS is huge in Brazil.
Sure.
Um, and they have definitely a huge leather component of their business. Um, and so, a lot of these systems, like not all of the Brazilians are terrible, but there is a portion of that supply chain that is definitely connected to systems of deforestation.
Yeah.
So that's where there's a lot of initiatives and a lot of identifying that leather is problematic when it is coming from a source that is perpetuating deforestation in the Amazon. Big problem. Um, those hides are typically then sent to China for tanning and manufacturing. That's where a lot of all of that is going on. And then that bag, might be then shipped back to, or the finished leathers or the finished product from China will then be sent to Italy for showroom, or New York, or all the way to the West Coast here, Los Angeles. And, when you really do that math, these hides are traveling upwards of 25,000 miles around the globe to become this finished bag in your hand. Um, and, you know, that makes no sense unless
No.
unless you're seeking to make the cheapest possible thing for consumer A, and you're okay with burdening all these other places with these massive externalities that we have not built into the cost of things. It's
Mm.
why we are where we are today, is because we have failed to see true cost. And yeah, leathers is a really interesting medium to observe that.
Yeah, I think that thank you for that because I really wanted to sort of define what makes range different in the way that you're building this supply chain and the way that you are, when we talk about true cost, there's also delivering true value. And a piece of this that I don't think we've touched on is how farmers and ranchers, which, as you and I know very well, operate on incredibly slim margins, if they really have any margins at all. And hides are a part of that. And so when you're reimagining this supply chain that no longer exists, there is value every step of the way from these ecologically outcome verified regenerative farms and ranches that the hides are coming from that are really renourishing the land and adding value in water capacity and in vegetation and in all of these different ways. But this is also providing another economic push for farmers that they actually get paid for the hide, which isn't currently the case. Is that correct?
Yeah, currently they are actually oftentimes paying to dispose of them, or it's built into, right, the cost to process, because that processor, it's their liability, so they pass that on to the producer. Um, the revenue component is important. It, this came from my own observation of what it actually takes to be a mid-sized farm and ranch. And we can't afford waste streams. Like when we sell our meat direct, we're selling every part of the animal. We find buyers for the pig skins. We are selling the offal. We are rendering the fat, and people buy the bones. And that is a part of what makes us work. It's what makes our transport costs work. And also, though, the margins are huge, and our mission is to increase the economic returns to the American ranchers. And through the supply chain, like if you are managing things in a way that improves the land bases, there's a premium for that. That we believe will incentivize, more ranchers who, a lot of them, most of them are doing things right. Might this incentivize them to do some monitoring, which I think is a good thing? That would be great. But the other component of this is also like there's a spiritual component to it, in that when we spend 2 years, or if you think about the mother cows, if we spend, and the bull and the genetics you've developed, we've spent a decade developing this herd, and we've spent 2 years raising this animal, and then it becoming food for people. To see valuable parts of this animal go into the trash, like that is not honoring the harvest. And I I hope people think of ranchers as the type of person who deeply cares about the work they do, about the well-being of their animals, and about that harvest, the giving of that life, going to good purpose to serve others. That's what makes this work valuable to us. And so to see things go into the trash, yeah, it has a mental and spiritual load to it that is worth just bringing up. So I just wanted to tack that onto the economic conversation around it.
Yeah, I absolutely, absolutely, that this is about utilizing the whole animal, about honoring every aspect of it. To me, that use, and I want to come back to something that you said, like we need to use what's here.
Yeah.
And honoring that use is about honoring land, human, animal, and something bigger, something I think that's a little bit intangible.
There's, if I come back to that experience in London, and really all my experiences at the sustainability summits and stuff, I just see a lot of focus, a lot of capital flowing to the creation of new innovative materials. Um,
Mhm.
and that being the solution. And that's what brought me to say, like, we need to use what is here. Circularity as a concept, the fashion industry is kind of talking about it, but it's still focusing so much on what thing can we create, which is really about just creating like more consumption, um, rather than use what is here, make repair and circularity more profitable and more beneficial. It's like we're still stuck in this linear thinking, the thinking around um, manufacturing and building businesses isn't evolving um, as quickly as the conversation around regenerative agriculture. So in tandem, I'm studying, and
Mm.
I have been studying more holistic ways to manage land regeneratively. I'm now in this phase of building Range Revolution where I'm really studying how we might build more regenerative organizations and more regenerative supply chains. So we have to first understand the problem, the waste stream. We have to understand where people's mindsets are. Um, and then we need to help build the story, which is why I feel so strongly about building brands around it. Because brands and how we design product are ultimately what is driving the supply chain. It's just reacting to what the designers and the businesses are demanding. So again, like we have to kind of reverse engineer if we want a more beautiful, um, just world here in America and abroad for other people. We really have to clean up our act when it comes to what we've been okay accepting in the development of supply chains, which is driven by the brands and the product they build.
Mm. I really want to dive into that. And there's this one little piece I can't let go of before we dive into that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I just have this quote from you that I pulled because I just want to like close this little piece and then I really want to talk about that brand and storytelling piece. But you said, and this is a quote, degrowth is the stickiest word in the vernacular for fashion right now. I've begun to rethink how we talk about this. In reality, some things must slow down, and in other ways, we have massive waste streams that need more widespread adoption and growth. For example, the use of virgin fibers must slow down and halt, but the use of wool and regenerative hides must increase due to their current states of being thrown in the trash. And so I just want to drive home this idea of using what's here as opposed to recreating something. And I think that sometimes when we're talking about, and you and I have talked about this some, when we're talking about mending a supply chain, it's not about reimagining a new one as much as it's reaching back towards an older one and sort of bringing that into the forefront. That it's not about a new technology, it's about an older way of being and doing.
Yep. It's a remembering. I think just like food, we kind of got thrust into this era of hyper convenience, hyper palatability, um, cheaper, faster, more. Um, it doesn't look like it's been going so well. And
Mhm.
I think um, a lot of this begins in the mind. Our ideas about consumption, our ideas about beauty,
Mhm.
you know, it all begins in this cultural mindset around what we value. And you know, I'll just tie this in. Thank you for bringing that quote up because yes, some areas like petrochemical based fast fashion has got to slow down and halt and I wish disappear. Um, it's incredible the amount of volume of plastic clothing that is being produced right now. Like fast fashion has like never been bigger.
Yeah,
And
the rise of Shine and Temu. I'm not pronouncing either of those right, but and where those clothes end up, which is something we've talked some on this podcast. I mean, they just end up in waterways and in developing countries. It's horrifying.
yeah, I mean, yeah, my sister does this work through the organization she's worked for 15 years, the Hip Hop Caucus, and they have been, fighting the establishment of more, oil refineries and the creation of, the oil companies are not planning to expand into vehicles anymore. They know what's happening, and the electric vehicle is taking a huge part of their business. And so the oil companies have been very hard at work redeveloping all of their product into new things that are in our fucking food, excuse me, our fashion, our children's toys.
Yes.
But fashion has never been growing faster and in the wrong direction. So that aspect of the fashion industry, they use these words degrowth, degrowth, degrowth. And yes, we need that sector of it to, you know, grow, grow less. These
Mhm.
other areas that really need our attention are in innovating how we actually recycle what's here. Most recycle programs have not gotten to a place of scale. They're still trying to prove that it can be like a VC venture, which is the type of money that tends to be funding these innovations is VC money. And VC money wants to see a 10x return. And so if this stuff is beneficial and still profitable, but not 10x profitable, they may not fund these endeavors, or they struggle to see them get to a certain level of profitability where it's worth it for them to keep pouring money into it. So in the last, however many months, we've actually seen a lot of the, kind of circular models start to contract.
Mm.
These other areas that need to grow in managing for the waste streams and being creating more circular repair models, we're going to need more creative capital. We're going to need more regenerative capital to see that side of the industry grow. So while regen ag on the farm needs to expand, regen brands, which are going to provide the throughput consistently and at fair prices for the farm level. And we're going to need the financiers and the creditors to build their next gen model to support these endeavors because they have different timelines, different infrastructure needs. And so capital also has to get more regenerative and more creative.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to dig into that. And I wonder if it's better to dig into capital first or brand first, because in some ways the brand is the piece that we touch. I think about it as one of my favorite ways that people find themselves learning about regenerative agriculture is because it just tastes better. And I think that flavor is such an interesting door. And I think with brands to build something that is beautiful, that is joyful, that is a tangible talisman of the hard and beautiful work of farmers and ranchers and economies, like that is our doorway, that we store something precious in there, and all of a sudden this bag opens up different avenues. And so I think there's building a regenerative brand and organization, and then the capital that funds it, or do I have this backwards?
Yeah, start with the brand. Let's start
Yeah.
there. And to do this work, first, the brand was dreamed in my mind to be this conduit for this bigger thing. And then I was like, okay, how do I fund doing this? So it's a natural progression to start with the brand.
Yeah. Tell me about building a regenerative brand and Range Revolution and what it means to dream this big dream and to make something tangible and to tell a story with that and through that.
Starting range um, in 2020 is when the rumblings of this really started. And I started to look into, I want to build a product. I thought it was going to be for Hampstead Hat Company. But I want to find hides that, align with my ethos, are coming from my peers. Like I want these to have story. I want these to have terroir. I want this to be
Mm.
like of this place. And as soon as you open up that door, you realize that there's no mechanisms to get any hides from anywhere really here on the West Coast. I couldn't get my own hides from our own steers. I couldn't get hides from the processor in Canby. I couldn't get hides. It didn't exist. And I was like, huh, so what are they doing with all of them? And then that was when I learned that they're just all being trashed. And it shocked me. And so when I started down the path, it was like every door I opened was just like kind of another unbelievable fact about what infrastructure has been lost.
Mm.
What I wanted to do originally was, just build um, a bag collection. That was the initial idea. And I was intentional about starting there with it for a lot of the reasons that you already just pick up on. Like, what is a tangible, valuable item that we use on nearly a day to day basis that is something that we can interact with and appreciate and has utility and value to us? But like, we want to be beautiful and they're expressions of our style and also like our way of life. Um, but also from a business perspective, this is an area that has room in the margins to build in a return to the rancher and a return to the processor. So we started there and we started building that first tote bag in 2021. I originally wanted to build here in America. So I started all of the research to try and find manufacturing partners in America. There were very few that could do what we were looking to do, and even fewer who were willing to talk to a startup with an idea, with an evolving supply chain. I found a small, leather maker in Portland who was willing to do that first run of bags, and we learned a lot through that first run of production. The hardware was cast in New Mexico, and we just did the one tote design with an American-sourced canvas that went inside the tote. And we took that to Cowboy Christmas, which is a big show that over 10 days in Las Vegas. And it was really the first, what is the temperature on this? Testing this product in the marketplace. And it was wonderfully received. And I was speaking to such a diverse range of people because that event in Vegas happens during the National Finals Rodeo. And so you're seeing a huge portion of the Western industry, 75,000 people over 10 days, a great opportunity to have a lot of people touch your product, talk to you about the story. And I just knew that what we were onto was so, it's ready to be received. And from December of 2021 through 22 and 2023, essentially, it's just been an expansion of building out the collection, working on the designs to have this foundational collection. In that whole time, I'll totally admit I've been stumbling with trying to find our brand voice. And I think that's, I tried working with an agency to help me do, some foundational brand work. And it just didn't really work. We weren't communicating what I was hoping to communicate. And I took time to just let the brand and the brand voice slowly start to find itself. And I needed to find some key people who understood this vision to help reflect back to me what it was that we were building. So the process of building the brand and the brand voice alongside the process of building this collection, while also building the connections and the infrastructure to get hides from A to B to C and work with the tannery, all that's been happening all at once. And where do I want to go from here? Maybe I want you to help prompt me from here.
Yeah, I think I want you to speak to what it is, the voice that you are coming into, because I think that this is something that so many of us experience, not just within a brand, within a farm, within a movement, within ourselves, is a coming home to the voice that feels authentic to us. And I think that that happens through trial and error, through failure, through these ups and downs of experiencing, through touching, through actually living through it. And I think that one of the things that I think is so beautiful with Range is that, for the last 3 years, you have been living and breathing this on the farm side, on the building a supply chain side, on a building the manufacturing of it, the raising of capital for it, and of the using it and living in it and sharing it with others during a time that you were also raising your first son and then growing and having your second son. And so I can't help but think that in my mind, this finding of voice is a growing of Range Revolution, but also of you.
I thank, honestly, the birth of my two sons for being these kind of pivotal moments that unlocked different things in me. And you're absolutely right. The evolution of this over the past 3 years, with my own personal evolution, the heavy lift at the beginning ran in parallel to a very heavy lift of pivoting our farm through the loss of irrigation waters, through the historic years of drought, And yeah, really demanding time of having young infants. And it was really just like this spring, right around the time that Crosby was born, something started to shake loose. And, I like to go down the rabbit holes of what's happening in the stars, like from biodynamics to, getting into the astrology of things. It makes sense. But, I think something also about going through those really tough years and coming out the other side of it so much more resilient as a farm and as a person. Our farm business completely pivoted during that time. But also, like, we've never been doing as well as we are doing now. And that happened through that time. And honestly, I personally have learned so much through these past 3 years about myself and my capacity to take on very hard things. Like building business, you think that's hard? Like, try childbirth. try pregnancy. Going through really difficult times, it can alchemize. And that's where Range Revolution is right now. And so, we just launched what is our first brand campaign. And it's called the Keep On Growing campaign. And this literally started to come into formation probably 3 weeks before I gave birth to Crosby. And I'd been struggling to find, like I said, brand voice, struggling to schedule like our first lifestyle photo shoot because I hadn't really found the person that was right for it. I hadn't dreamed up the location for it. And I just didn't really know who I was going to work with on it. And one night it all came to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if Nikki Bloom was our muse? And I've known Nikki for a decade. Our lives have run in parallel in different ways, which we can talk about. But it all came to me at once. And I just started doing these little pings. I texted my friend Lauren, who's a great photographer, and was like, hey, I just had this idea. I know Nikki's going to be out on the West Coast on this date performing. Would you be available? What would you think she'd be interested in doing this with us? And it just all came together within days. We had the photographer, we had Nikki as our campaign muse, we had a wonderful videographer, and Lisa, who had recently joined the Range Revolution team to lead all things marketing, PR, communications. She just jumped in with me and we made this thing happen. And at the same time, Nikki has been recording a new album. And after the photo shoot and we were putting things together, we were like, oh, what music will we put to it? And Nikki just offered, she said, look, I've got some new songs. Like, why don't you guys listen to some of the new stuff and like, let's do some sort of exclusive, release and tease the new album, which won't come out until 2025. And I heard one of the songs on the album is called Keep On Growing. And when I heard the lyrics to that song and like the entire feeling of the song, I was like, that's it. That's the feeling I'm seeking to capture through this brand right now, which is one of Nikki has been on her own hero's journey. And she's gone through some tough things and some hard times, and she wrote some great albums about those hard times. And she's in this era of contentedness and joy and some wisdom from the shit she just got through. And, there's this line in there, so many of them, but, you'll never know if you'll reap what you're sowing. Just keep on growing and pray for the sun. And man, if that is not like my anthem for having gotten through the past 5 years of big challenge on the farm level and just in the grime of startup. And we're in a new chapter now where a lot of that early, really mucky stuff has been worked out. And now it's time to bring forth the beauty and the joy of what we've just spent 3 years working really hard for. And so Range is in this really exciting moment of starting to introduce this brand and starting to communicate what is this feeling we seek to create through this as a design project. The feeling we want you to feel when you pick up that bag and you take it off into the day with you, when you choose what you want to carry in this world, what is that feeling? And that's the power of branding. And I am no master. I am just a, dedicated student of trying to bridge communication to help people feel that feeling.
And I think you do this, and I think that you do this through your words and through Kate, your incredible leadership. You are one of the most inspiring women I know. You know how to grind and hustle and put in the hard work with joy and laughter and play and heaviness and realness and grit in a way that is unparalleled to me. And I think that there's something really special about how Nikki's lyrics and their copaceticness, their synthesis with Range Revolution mirrors on so many levels. There's this aspect of the personal journey, and I'm going to read this again. You got to keep on growing up to stay young. There's no way of knowing if you'll reap what you're sowing. Just keep on growing and pray for the sun. That there is a personal journey, that there is a journey in these businesses that I think a lot of us are building right now. And then there's this big scale of what it means to carry this as this generation to explore that there is no way of knowing if we'll reap what we're sowing, but we just got to keep on praying for the sun. And so I think that there's something really beautiful about all the layers and the as above and so belowness of this.
Keep on growing. And which way do you want to grow? Because we all have a choice where and how we grow into our next chapters. And this brand, it is by nature a disruptor. And there's this quote, I gotta read it because it's been
I might
on
have
my
it too.
here.
Is it the Jerry Colonna quote?
Yes. You're always so on the same wavelength. I love our friendship. How am I complicit in creating the conditions I say I do not want? Jerry Colonna said that. That in the process of becoming, CEO of this company, going out there and having to learn new skill sets of raising capital to do something like this. There's a lot of decisions to make that will shape the outcome of the thing you're creating. And so those early steps of establishing a business and a brand, you really have to hold that question close and just be very discerning in the decisions you make and the people that you bring into this, because your capital partners are going to be some of your most important long-term partners. They have to be in it with you through the ups and the downs, and they have to trust you and your vision. And so what I've been in this recent chapter really focusing on is the reimagining and making sure that my thinking is big enough to address this big problem. And coming from, my family, my parents both worked for themselves, small family businesses, and Havstead Hat Co. and Casad Family Farms. I've explored and thought and looked at what it would mean to scale those into bigger entities, and it doesn't make sense from I think a world and my personal mission perspective. They are the right size for what they are. But Range Revolution is the bigger picture brand that is supposed to be here to disrupt and to reconnect. And that Jerry Colonna quote, if I'm thinking too small, if I'm thinking about this work as burdensome, you can accidentally create those exact conditions which you're seeking to undo. So that's been a real guiding light when thinking about how to structure things, how we might build a team, and how we will grow and scale.
I think this also opens up, and I wanna say it again just for listeners because I wrote it down and then I wrote it down on a sticky and I put it in my office this morning. How am I complicit in creating the conditions I say I do not want? And I actually, as you were saying that, I've been playing with there's a first aid kit lyric that I always come back to, and I'm gonna butcher it a little bit, but it's I've built these shackles in my attempt to be free. And I think as we reimagine systems, and you are such a systems thinker, we have to constantly pass through these checkpoints of am I just recreating the same system, right? And I think this really harkens to me, there's a great quote associated with Mark Fisher, and it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And I come back to this idea that whenever we have a zombie movie or a post-apocalyptic situation, we're always just trying to get back to rebuild exactly as we were. And that always boggles my mind that we don't want to reimagine. And so I think that this is an incredible guidepost, and I also think that this is a good segue into what it is to build a regenerative organization and regenerative capital. That what got us here, that emptying of farmland the debt that came due in the 80s that emptied out a lot of farmland, the 544,000 farms that we've lost since 1981.
Yeah.
A lot of that was this get big or get out, Earl Butz, who was then Secretary of Ag in the 70s, and this consolidation of farms and this race to the bottom of valuing profitability of even just a penny, right? I was listening to something this morning, and to close the toes of socks in Honduras versus Alabama, which used to be the sock capital of the United States, they saved a penny on each pair of socks, but those pennies added up, and just that mindset became so insidious and so widespread, whether it was in agriculture or manufacturing. And so we need funders that have a different idea, that aren't just about that 10x that so many venture capital, so much VC money is about, and have to build a very different partnership. So,
Yeah.
and you have been boots on the ground in this in a way that is incredible. So, talk to me about regenerative funding and regenerative organizations.
I'll start this rabbit hole with I am hardly an expert. I am just somebody who dove in head first, 2 years ago to start learning about what does it mean to raise capital and what does it mean to raise capital for like a social, ecological enterprise in
Mhm.
this day and age, which was a really interesting time. I just love to pick, challenging times to do things because from 2012 through 2018, startup land was wildly like money was moving loose. Like excitement, valuations, and just money flowing into startups was abundant. And then things started to get obviously very weird as entire global supply chains started to contract, and money follows all of those disruptions, so things started contracting. So what's interesting about diving into raising capital in a time like this where it's kind of like we've gotten back to the real of money. It's less imaginary like valuations, and it's more show me how this actually works, which is good. It's a good readjustment. And it means like, the fat rises to the top. Like a lot of businesses are not going to get funded. And so, I was thrown into the gauntlet and I needed to do my very, very best to be successful to convince people of what we were building was going to provide a return and was going to solve a really important problem. And what I've learned in the last 2 years is that while the conversation around regenerative agriculture or circularity in fashion it's pretty loud, it's being written about, it's being talked about, and there's percolating legislation that hasn't yet really addressed it. The funding is it's just further behind, and it's starting to catch up. But what we really need is more diversity of capital models, just like we need a greater diversity of businesses. And what I mean by that is, you've got your options of, you can raise from friends and family, you can raise from angel investors, you can raise from funds that focus on seed stage. You can raise from VCs that want to see, a 5-year exit plan. And there's lots of different kinds of money, and that money drives how oftentimes these organizations grow. And so I would get frustrated in the beginning when I would have these conversations, which I now know were with the totally wrong people, but I was learning. Like, it's like anything else. I was like getting my reps in of how do I talk about this, and what do deal structures look like, and what are they going to want to see? And I went to this Regenerative Food System Investment Forum, which is kind of the most cohesive and best gathering of funders in the space. And I got to speak on this panel of farmers to kind of open up the conference. And, I chose to tell this story to try and humanize what we're talking about. And I'll take a moment just to kind of take you on the journey of how I decided to like end it with these people who hold the keys to transformation, because capital does hold the keys to rebuilding this infrastructure. So we have to understand how to engage with it. And coming from a farmer background, coming from, a small business ownership where like really this has just been self-funded or like minor loans. When we're talking about bigger infrastructure rebuilding, we need to understand how to engage with the capital holders and make them our partners. And I tried to paint this picture where I was like, just close your eyes for a minute and imagine the streams are flowing clearly, and the salmon have returned to our tributaries, and our grasslands have restored to perennial health, and the elk are abundant, and the streams run cool, and our children are healthy, and we and our communities are flourishing. Like, what are you willing to give for that future? Because that's what we're here to talk about. And the rest of the conference was going to go on to be very technical, right? And very like, and I just wanted to ground the conversation between a small representation of farmers and agriculturalists and the small representation of brand builders that were in that room, with the 80% of people in that room, which held hundreds of billions of dollars looking for investment opportunities. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about new ways of moving money. And I'll say this, Range has raised through, primarily angel investors. And those are people who tend to invest in, startup, early stage companies. And, we'll probably raise again in a different way with more kind of more under us, the bigger picture more solidified. But what's an important component to building businesses like this, it can't just be, or, it's tough to just do equity. You also have to have debt structures. And I would argue, actually, we got to have just debt structures to allow stuff like this to go too. And the new model of like what some funds are looking like is really interesting. So there's a fund that's being formed right now that will provide debt to, ideas in early stage businesses like this and they can provide that debt with, delayed payments, and they can provide that debt at a below market rate interest rate because their funders are philanthropic people who have agreed to take no more than 3% return on their money.
Mm.
That's a perfect example of one type of diversity of debt that we need to fund disruptive things that might not look like the traditional VC model. It might take more time to get to 10x, or it might only be a 6x in reality.
Mhm.
Um, and you need the money to flow to those endeavors, but the structure has to be different, or else, like that Jerry Colonna quote, the money might push the development of those businesses in a way where we're creating the same conditions that we're actually trying to undo.
Yes.
So, I like to tell investors, like, they are the capital artists. We have a role to play as entrepreneurs in being the big picture and the systems thinker, the dreamers, and the dummies willing to jump into the arena. And we need the storytellers and the podcasters and the writers, and we need the capital artists who are going to be a part of reimagining the rebuild. So, that fiber fund, that's one example. Another example of capital is like Mad Agriculture's model from an agriculture perspective, where same thing, they're providing debt with delayed repayment to allow people the 3 years to transition their farmland to organic. And it's interest only for those first 3 years until you are certified organic. And then from there, they also are providing a below market rate interest rate, because their funders are more on the philanthropic side, willing to take slightly less of a return. So, the capital is just as much as a part of this reimagining. And I've met some really incredible people who are putting their money to work in really encouraging ways.
Mm. You offered such a stunning vision of what things can be when we reimagine our world. This place of perennial grass and clear streams and cool soil and waters and healthy children playing. And one of the words that I've heard you say a lot in the course of this conversation is disrupt. But the other word that I've heard you say a lot is to connect. And I can't help but think as you're talking that there is a need to break something, to break the mold that we have been given, to crack open our imagination so that we can think much, much bigger and we can reimagine in all of these different ways, and to disrupt what we've been given in every sector, from funding to agriculture to manufacturing to fashion to all of these different places, in order to actually connect us back to what matters, back to land, back to health, back to one another, back to a model of doing business that is generative and in favor of the incredible efficiencies that a stream has to offer instead of an irrigation ditch.
So much of what we've talked about is comes back to, or has resulted in, massive consolidation. And I keep coming back to how that makes us so vulnerable, and it makes life so homogenous, like
Mm,
consolidation does, right? Like, if everything's supposed to taste the same, look the same, feel the same, act the same, make the same freaking content on social media with the same music that's trending, like, right, the
yeah.
homogenization of all
Yes.
of this.
Even the marketing is
Yeah,
homogenized. The
yeah,
algorithm homogenizes.
yeah, it's like we have been, um, corralled into, like, that this homogenous way is, like, appealing, or like we're just willing to go along with it. And it's like, it's just, it sucks the life out of things. It's the irrigation ditch, it's not the stream. And so, yeah, absolutely. We need to break apart and disrupt like the homogenization of all of this stuff. Really, if you look at who owns our food system, just as much as you look at who owns our fashion supply chains, it's
Hmm.
usually consolidated.
Our
And
farmland also.
our farmland, our
I,
the seeds,
yeah.
the so yes, we are the generation who is asked to, given the opportunity to break apart, disrupt, and rebuild with more diversity, and that you know I won't get political about it, but like, there is some stuff shaking loose at a policy level that is starting to move money back into rebuilding of infrastructure. So again, I go back to that coyote teetering on this plank over this, massive canyon. It really matters where we stand right now and where we put our energy and our focus and work. And it's ultimately why I've decided this area matters, because it's so tied in with and it's so emblematic of like all the other systems of consolidation, waste, social and ecological externalities. And it's fun. That's important for this work for me, is that I to do this, I can get heady, and I care so dang much, it keeps me up, and that's why I can obsess about this work the way you must, because I care so much, but it's got to be fun. And that's what this era is for me in this business building and starting to bring the brand to market, and how we ended up in this place with the Keep on Growing campaign. I'm really starting to dream um, bigger in how this solution might look. And I'm really excited about, you know, I want to tell more of the story of the building of the brand and be transparent about the process,
Mm.
because I want to look back in 10 years and people can see. I want to provide a blueprint how this can be done. And I don't want to be the biggest leather company in the world. I want there to be many Range Revolution like companies solving this problem in their ecoregion. There's plenty for me to solve here just in the Pacific Northwest's fiber shed. Um, and and that's what's driving this. So it's both, um, we have to think big about solutions to the big problems, while also understanding the limits of growth that are going to keep us on track with producing the outcomes we truly want.
Yes. I that was said so perfectly that there is just there is nothing else that I could add to it in terms of that, because I think that is there has to be a limit on growth, and we have to humanize this. That's another word choice of yours that I really connected to. Like, this is a human thing. This is about the hands that raise and move and make and fundraise and imagine, that this is a very human endeavor in its disruption, and it has to be playful. And one of the things I love, like, you are leading this. You are leading this with play. You are leading this with honesty and humility. And you told me something the other night. You said that you are always seeking truth. And oftentimes I feel like I'm trying to touch the heart of something, right? I'm trying to touch the center of the web where all of those strands connect and ripple out into the whole space. And I think that Range Revolution has done that, because you have found this thing that is about play and beauty and what we carry, again, the social and ecological impact, the manufacturing impact, to farming, to people, right? It really is just sitting at the heart of something. But at the heart of that, for me, as your friend that has the honor of witnessing you in this, is you and your incredible leadership and desire to provide others with a blueprint and to say, hey, come along with me while we reimagine this world. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but we're going to have a good time.
It's gotta be the attitude. That there's another quote that like I've kept really close lately, which is that, you can either cry in the storm or dance in the rain. And believe me, I've cried in the storm. It has been bumpy. My faith has been challenged. And ultimately, like, I have decided to dance through it all, and keep going. And that is probably the most important part of going from just imagining something to then building it, is the capacity to make it through the storms and still maintain the joy for the work, and really loving the process.
Yes. I'm just listening to Crosby. This is Crosby's moment. You want to go pause and grab Crosby?
Where did we leave off?
Left off still kind of wrapping up, talking about capital and growth and reimagining and humanizing. That
Yep.
This is about humanizing and sort of closing that conversation of disrupt to connect.
Thank you. Yeah, that to kind of break apart and rebuild in a more beneficially connected, a more distributed way. We are literally reconnecting the spider web of smaller processors with smaller tanneries, with smaller manufacturing partners in LA. Like, we're rebuilding those connection points and rehumanizing what has gotten offshored and what has gotten, externalized and quite homogenous.
That's what we were really in the homogenizing.
We were really into the homogenization of everything.
Yeah.
And so, to come back to like, okay, so if that's what we are doing, how do we then build that feeling through the brand, through how we market, which is marketing is just connecting. It's just connecting with the person we seek to connect to and telling our story of why our product represents what it represents in their life.
And we don't get that chance to connect anymore, right? I just had a frustrated internet ordering moment where I needed something, and I missed actually what it meant to sort of go in person and connect.
Yeah.
And I think that we're humans and we need connection, and we need that sense of tangibility with one another as much as we need it in the things that we touch and experience every day that touch our skin. And so how are you reimagining how to connect with people with range?
Recently, the focus is back in person. And so we've been planning essentially.
You were telling us about some in-person opportunities to actually connect people to the brand.
Yeah. What's been on my mind about how we effectively communicate what it is that we're trying to do. This is not just a bag. This is not just about leather. This is about something, a much bigger conversation and a much bigger opportunity, to reconnect these supply chains in a way that actually benefits the people who are stewarding the lands that we care so much about collectively. How do you communicate that through product, right? It's difficult to do that online. Like,
Yeah.
a leather bag is kind of a leather bag in the digital space. It is when you pick those items up and you feel the full grain leather and you feel what a really nice veg tan leather can feel like, and you see the nuanced natural characteristics. Yeah, you know,
I
it's
know. I was
totally
gonna pick
different.
it up. I want to touch it while you talk about it.
It's totally different to see something than it is to touch that thing. That's very human. That's why I think fashion and style is so interesting and exciting, is because of the beauty of the textiles that make these things that we wear. So to feel it feels so important, and to reconnect in person with people. So much of the brand and sales space has moved to digital
Mhm.
homes, and that's always going to be a part of it, and 100% we are a part of it, and you communicate a lot through imagery and video and whatnot. But I'm really excited about taking this opportunity and getting back in person and going on a bit of a road show. We're going to be in Los Angeles with our collection, meeting with retailers, letting them see and feel and talk about what this is all about, and scoping out some spaces that could be potential pop-up locations for retail, store,
Yeah.
and you know just showroom opportunities that people will be able to come and feel and touch these. And then also just do, akin to what I did in 2015 with Hampstead Hat Co. I went on, a nationwide roadshow, and I just put us in front of people to present what it is that we were really trying to do. And it was really one of the best things I could have done for Hampstead Hat Company. So we're
Mm.
doing that again here with Range Revolution. And it's so fun to be, 9 years
Yeah. 10.
since,
You
oh
said
my God.
2013. 11. I can't even do math on this.
Well,
11 years.
2015 is when I went on the road with Hampstead Hat Co. I mean, really, I started going on the road with it as early as 2014. So it's been 10 years since I did that the first time around with my first business baby. And, you know, to do this now, 10 years wiser, 10 years, um, just looking ahead with a new lens, obviously, as an older person. And like we keep coming back to this moment in time in the world where it really feels like it really matters where I stand in my work. To
Mhm.
go back out and be face to face with people and reconnect through this medium of design and consumer products that are with us every day feels good to return to some in person. I think we're all craving some more in person
Yes.
reconnection, kind of just town centers. Like, we want that feeling back, and the
Yeah.
internet can only generate so much of that.
I think it's that space of conviviality that south of the Hamish line, Old Salt really gave me this last year, that what it is to be in the same space with these people that I've been online with for all these years absolutely changes everything. It changes everything when we can touch, when we can hug, when we can see and experience something in person in that town hall like manner. And I'm going to need some tips because I'm going to take the podcast on the road in the fall, which I'll kind of tease here, and I'm trying to figure out how to put that together. I'm just kind of at the beginning of that. And so I think that's important to humanize this and to rebuild a sense of community that isn't the homogenization of the internet and the algorithm, that we are all real meat and flesh coming together with leather and fiber, and we have big
It's
ideas.
I have to pay attention to what's happening in the greater, world of retail because of what we're doing. And what's happening right now, which is, I think, a reflection of the shifting desire in, I hate even using the word consumer. Like, we have to come up with a better word. I don't have the answer, but like, to call ourselves consumers then makes us
Well,
feel like we are here to do is consume, and that's part of the problem.
Actually,
But
to harken back to this, I recently pulled for a podcast the actual definition of consume, and it means, I'm trying to see if I can find it quickly. Um, Consume really has to do, to destroy by separating into parts which cannot be reunited, as by
huh,
burning or eating. And so to me, to consume is about parts. And so what we need something that is about the whole, that is holistic, that is a circular.
good point, Kate. Good way to pull that out. Yeah. We don't want systems of all these disparate parts. Like,
Yeah.
that's the problem. And so bringing the cohesion back. So we need a new word, consumers out. So, but I think that what's happening right now, a lot of the big retail conglomerates are really struggling, or some are shutting down. So again, we're seeing a huge amount of consolidation within the bigger retail model. And I won't name names, but that is happening. Um, and at the same time, like, are we seeing a conjunct revival of the independent retailers and boutiques, where there's a more curated, more intimate, more of this place kind of opportunity to shop? I would love to see that return, but again, it comes down to kind of breaking down our habits of buying, our habits of consuming, where we choose convenience over resilience. And you don't
Yeah.
see that in the moment you buy the thing, but that impulse when, like, oh, I need this thing, it would be so much easier to order on Amazon. For sure, I live rural. I have to do that to a certain extent,
I
or I
do too.
choose to do that. But like, to really think about, that hardware store, that feed store, that place, where we go to find a nice blouse for a special event, to have that in person and tactile experience is deeply human. It makes our communities richer. We all ultimately want that. So, to go back to Jerry Colonna's quote,
Mhm.
in how we spend our money and how we think about convenience or value, aka cost, we have to return to that question, like, how am I complicit in creating the conditions that I truly don't want?
Yeah.
um that's so I'm hopeful that, again, like the swinging of the pendulum, we swung hugely to an online space, which was very cool when the online space was like the town hall, and it was very organic connection, and what we were being shown was just, it was self-directed, what we would find or find through other people. Now the online spaces are so algorithmic
Yeah.
that it's no longer a space of our creation. It's it's
We're the
driving our
ones
behavior.
being consumed.
Yeah, it's totally driving us. We are not driving
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So
I actually, in this, I want to return to something that you said. You had posted a photo of a pile of hides and sort of had said this photo represents what happens when a society trades in resiliency for convenience, cheaper goods instead of forever goods. And I think that pause between the decisions we make of what and where and how we act as this word consumer that needs an update very much. I think in some ways we can be supporters instead of consumers, that we can be supporters of brands that have missions and causes and different pieces, but I
you know
don't know
what I
what it
like?
is.
I like co-conspirator.
Oh, I love that. I love that a lot. Yeah,
I don't know if it rolls
that
off
makes me
the
feel
tongue.
well, and that has a little edge of sort of rebellion and getting into trouble as we build this new thing, as we disrupt this new thing that really resonates with me.
Yeah, let's make a little good, like, let's make some good trouble, right? let's shake things up a little bit. Let's bring some life back into fashion. Like, ew, fashion, style and fashion used to be so um original and a
Yeah.
true expression of who we are. And again, in this, you know, kind of erosion of individuality towards this homogenous look, this homogenous system, we've kind of lost the individuality that fashion used to represent. And so I'm excited for a next generation of how we build brands that embody something more than just like the irrigation ditch, the efficiencies that we have figured out in this world. What about the beauty? What about the joy and the connection? And what about just like the true love of a fine textile? You don't do that when you grab like a poly blend shirt. You aren't like, ooh, ooh, this poly is so luxurious. Like
No.
like linen and cotton and leather, wool, which wool, we're talking about cattle hides right now. The same problem exists for sheep hides. There's nowhere for sheep hides to go.
Mhm.
Wool, that industry has been totally decimated in favor of the synthetics.
Mhm.
But these are the materials that, like, I, as a nerd for style and beauty, and I think anybody who really truly values that, it is the natural fibers that hold this indescribable beauty when you touch them.
They do, and they age with us too. As you were talking about this, when we talk about forever goods or longer lasting goods, they hold this indescribable draw because I think that we have been drawn to them for time immemorial. We've been tanning hides for a long time. I kind of did some digging before this, and it's hard because leather isn't something that is easily preserved in a fossil record. It wants to degrade in the best
Yeah.
possible way. I think in that same
Yeah.
way, Ben Goldfarb says the most beautiful thing about a beaver dam is that it breaks, right? The
Yeah.
most beautiful thing about these fibers is that they'll go back into the earth, that they're not plastic. And we've been doing this for, I think, tens of thousands of years. And they develop a patina. When I think about my linen sheets, when I think about this leather bag, they wear with us. When I think about a great pair of cotton jeans, they show the marks of where we've been and how we've touched them. And they carry that with them as a piece of us. And so not only are they beautiful, but they also, I don't know, we can mark them in a
They take
different
on
way.
they take on the character of our life for sure.
Yes. That.
And that's what I love
Yes.
about, like, a great hat, a great old hat. Like, I don't make myself new hats. Like, I love the 3 hats that I've had for a decade, and I clean them up and I reshape them in different ways, and I love the life they've taken on. But
Yes.
this is one of the key areas why I believe we have to build disruptive brands that have this ethos as a center pillar around which we build the entire organization, product line, supply chain, because the incumbent big companies, a lot of them have built a perception of perfection, and that starts at the
Mhm.
design room, right? Like, it
Yes.
actually starts with the branding. Like, the
Yes.
branding of an Hermes bag is about absolute perfection, and that is what luxury has kind of come to mean in a way, is
Mhm.
perfection, homogenization,
Mhm.
and exclusivity, right? Aspirational things. Like, I would love if there was a remembering of, like, what is truly luxurious. Like, I think that something that is so well made that it's going to last a lifetime, something that is like seeped in story and terroir and character, is a natural fiber that's going to feel beautiful in my hands and return to the earth, and something that is born of a supply chain that brings more life to
Mm,
rural landscapes and grasslands, that's luxury. That is
yes.
luxury. And
Yes.
so I'm
And
not going to like,
diversity.
yeah.
And yeah, it's everything. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we both get excited because it's
Yeah.
like, yes, that is the marrow of it. I don't like, like the food we eat. You and I both have very similar ethos around food. Like, we don't really mess around with a bunch of fancy things. Like, we let the quality of the food shine in and of itself, and it's prepared in quite a simple way, but it's so amazing because it's been born of healthy soils and healthy places. And in the same way, like natural fibers, they hold that kind of beauty to me. But the issue with the bigger system moving this direction is that so much of it at the design table, it's how these companies are structured. They're still so siloed. So the design people are not talking to the sustainability people, and they're not talking to the buyers and the merchandisers, and they're not talking to the people actually making the product.
Yeah.
And so those very siloed organizational structures struggle to change, struggle to move beyond just
Mm,
trying stuff like this in a pilot stage, because the organizational structure itself lends itself to not
mm.
really changing and embracing um, natural characteristics in these raw materials. They need homogeny. Yeah.
But that's part of disrupting break to break these siloed structures and organizations apart and to weave them back together into something that is more connected, that talks to where all of these different pieces and parts and values and stakeholders and shareholders are talking to one another. And I think for me, I'm coming back to the idea of keep on growing, that we don't just have to grow in the idea of that asymptotic curve, that hockey stick growth in perpetuity, that we can grow laterally, that we can grow deeper roots, that we can grow in our connections to one another, that growth it's not just an upwards trajectory. Growth is something that is all encompassing, and so I think we have to break those spaces down so that we can better understand that luxury is our children playing in clean water and cool soils of perennial grass, and that the sort of smooth surfaces of perfection that we have thought of as modernity and luxury, that what we really miss is texture and character.
Yep. Yep. It's one of those things where I know everybody in every walk of life. We all have a lot of decisions to make every day. It's hard to fully dive in and understand and peel back the layers. It's fun to have conversations like this with people like you who like to go in and dig deep and understand. Not everybody's there. And, I that was a hope with, again, and how we start to build our brand voice is how might we be in the world adding value, not just through the products that we are building and the supply chains that we are a part of rebuilding, but also how are we inspiring other people to ask questions and explore areas and topics that have been a little dormant for a while here in how we spend our money, how we wake up and dress every day, how we, grocery shop and prepare our food. And that's what the Keep on Growing campaign became. It started with this resonating with this anthem of a song, which is about being in it for the long game. It's about really being in it for the long game in our art, in our creativity, in our relationships, in the work that we're putting out into the world. And and to come out of the bumpy times with some clarity and a dedication to build something more beautiful. And then it became, how do we turn this campaign to say, here we are, world, we're Range Revolution, and this is what we stand for, and turn that into a conversation and ask other people as we explore what Keep on Growing means for us as an organization, us as a disruptive movement of a new era of brands, us as communities. How do we want to grow? And that's an individual question. We're asking that question. We're building in response to it. And I just want that to be the conversation that is inspired. And there's really no better outcome. If you buy one of our products and you choose to support our mission, heck yes, thank you. If what we do is we just inspire a new conversation and you take this conversation about what is really luxury, that's how culture changes. Like, wait, who fed us this bill? Who told me that this homogenous beige palette is luxury? Like, who sold me this idea? And start questioning that enculturation. That's a total win too. But yeah, in the process, we have an opportunity to move hundreds of thousands of hides out of the trash and turn them into these talismans that we carry with us every day. And it gives people a tether and a chance to be a part of the regeneration of rangelands. Even though they won't partake in this work physically with us here in these rural areas, design and building of a brand, it might be this connection point to allow people to be our co-conspirators in this work and to have a piece of what it means to rebuild a more beautiful, stream versus irrigation ditch.
Yes. I said it so beautifully, and I just feel that you have absolutely come into the voice of this brand. You are in many ways the voice of this brand. What I love about what you've built is that you want to inspire other people to take voice and authorship in stories within this brand, but you are also there at the heart of it for me. And it's just really beautiful to see you talk about this thing that I truly believe is going to start a revolution.
It's taken a lot of support and reflections from friends and trusted confidants to help me come back to find my voice, because there's been periods in the build and the grind and when I can get lost in the minutia. And it's taken, having lots of conversations like this with my friends to kind of help me bring me back to what I know is at the core of this. So, this stuff isn't, if we had this conversation 4 months ago, I wouldn't have had the same vocabulary and I wouldn't have the same big picture clarity that I have now. And so if anybody else is in it, like, there's times you just got to know you're just going to be in the mud. I think Amber Smith, she totally said this. I think maybe if it was an interview with Ed on Mountain and Prairie, I think it was. Amber Smith is the founding director of Women in Ranching, which I should add, the Keep on Growing campaign, this collaboration with singer-songwriter Nikki Bloom, who I shouldn't gloss over. She is a legend. Like, Nikki Bloom gets to play. I mean, she's asked to play with the founding members of Grateful Dead, and she's just the queen of like California
Mhm.
country soul. So getting to collaborate with her is just like a dream come true. But this campaign is also in benefit of this organization called Women in Ranching. But Amber Smith, who's the founding director of Women in Ranching, she said something in that interview with Ed about how, like, sometimes you're just gonna be in the mud and you gotta just sit in it. And that's an important point of understanding these journeys in doing hard things. And you know this, Kate. There are these chapters where you're gonna just be in the mud and you gotta just be in it. And
Yeah.
and you will not be in it forever. And I think the difference between truly being successful and making change and not and giving up is kind of your
Mm.
capacity to sink in those moments where you know you're in the mud and still find ways to enjoy the process as its own reward. And
Yes.
that's a huge part of the journey. And then you will come out no mud, no lotus.
No mud, no lotus. This to enjoy the process is, I think, something that's really salient for like, I felt like you were speaking to me just then. That sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you have to find some joy, some contentment in that process.
Yeah, and you need good friends.
Yeah. I actually and I wanna make sure that we've covered things for range, that there isn't anything else that's burning a hole in your pocket that you're carrying with you that you wanna leave here in this conversation before I say one last little piece.
Well, I'll say I'm also this era is about it's about calling in the support, and getting more comfortable with kind of just speaking out into the world what it is we need to do this work because um when what you're doing seeks to serve something much bigger and people outside of yourself, it actually gets a lot easier to say quite directly what it is that you need, and that's how I feel about range right now. And, as we start to get this brand out into the world, both we're building a direct to consumer model and we're also wholesaling to retailers. And so this is just an invitation that if there's um, a boutique, an independent retailer that you love or you think has a really interesting curation, um, we are looking to meet with people. And so our roadshow, which is going to take us down to California in a couple weeks here, we'll be in Los Angeles meeting with retailers and boutique owners and just talking to various people about the brand. We're going to be doing this as well in Dallas and Fort Worth and Austin.
Mm.
And also, we're going to be in Jackson Hole, Wyoming later this summer. We're going to be at Old Salt Festival in Montana here in just a few weeks.
Oh,
Um,
shoot. Yeah, a few weeks. Yep.
it's coming up so fast. Um, so this is just an invitation. Like if there is a cool independent retailer and boutique that you think should see our collection, please reach out to us so that we can connect with them. Um, and just continue to return to the questions.
Mm.
How and I say this because I have to ask myself this all the time. How am I complicit in creating the conditions that I do not want? And and how do you want to keep on growing? That prompt means so much to me right now. Um, because we all just have a choice and it has collective impact when we choose to reinvest into more regenerative systems, more regional systems.
Mm. I love that so much, and I can't help but I recently looked up the etymology of support, and it means it's from the French porter and a Latin piece that means below, but porter means to carry, and so I just there's a piece of that I love because to me a lot of this, as I dreamed about this, is about what I'm carrying, what I'm choosing to carry, those things that are most precious to us that we are carrying into the future as we remake our world because we can just as easily we've made it and we can just as easily remake it.
We can just as easily remake it, and what would it look like, if in pop culture, instead of seeing petroleum as the medium, donning
Mm,
celebrities and just, every
mhm,
store that you walk into, what if there was a shift over the next 10 years to natural fibers? How
mhm.
different the impact of the fashion supply chain might have on this world. It has great impacts for our children's future because if we keep putting out more plastic into the world, we kind of know what that looks like. And It's totally possible to reverse and remember.
Yes, to remember too. I Can I say a little piece about friendship before
Yeah.
we stop? Because I think that this has been the most expansive friendship I've ever had in my life with you. And I was really noodling on that this morning because you have been such an inspiration, right? I really do think that you are a thought leader, but you are also leading by example. You are leading by play. You are leading by your hmm, you're bringing people along as co-conspirators and your sense of fun in this. But you have also redefined what it is to have a space where we can inspire one another as friends and grow towards our dreams separately and also together as friends. That there is more space in this friendship for me to be forgiven or to have space when I'm quiet or when I'm going through the hard stuff, as much as there has been these gentle nudges to think bigger and to dream bigger.
Mhm.
And I you have redefined what friendship is for me and to grow into that space. And so I want to thank you because I also think you're leading the charge here, and I'm just so in awe of you, and I just think the world of you, and I'm so grateful for you.
Great. I mean, I'll reflect right back to you. The way that your mind works and the types of conversations that we get to have are expansive for me. And you end up pulling things out of me. And I see you do this in other people all the time. You pull out, I think, some of the greatest ways of thinking, or you help people find their space to articulate it.
Mm.
And so, reflected right back to you, I, I about 2 years ago, I really started this process of calling in what I felt like was, some new friendships that I wanted, or the types of people and the types of energy
Me
I
too.
really wanted to be around,
Me
right?
too. Yeah. Yeah,
It
it was about 2 years ago. Me too.
and I'm not too woo-woo. I mean, no, I am pretty woo-woo, but, I say that, but, um, it is another reminder of what is possible when we sow those seeds of intention, and you're one of the most wonderful things to come out of sowing the seed of intention, to have more friendships around me that, help me see truth, you know?
Oh, well, you do that for me. You help me see truth, and it's just a delight, and I am so excited for this campaign, this Keep on Growing campaign, and to have Range Revolution one step more into the world. And I have very big dreams for this for you. I really do believe that it's right at the heart of something, and it's also touching the heart of something. And I can't wait to see all the directions and ways in which it grows and inspires other people to grow too.
I hope so, I hope in 10 years, we're looking back and we understood these times as pivotal, and I also, like you, I have this visceral, vision of the Wile E. Coyote on this
Mhm,
wobbly plank,
mhm.
and, I'm just grateful for the types of nuanced conversations that I see happening, and people choosing to stand, in bold areas and go into areas where it's unknown what the outcome of our efforts will
Mm,
be. But if there's ever been a time to be bold in our actions,
it's now.
um, it's now. It,
Yeah,
it's it's now, and there's never been a better time.
yeah, and there's no way of knowing if you'll reap what you're sowing. Just
Yep.
keep on growing and pray for the sun. I think
Listen to that
closing
song, and
there.
that's gonna be
Yeah.
like summer jam.
We will have links to Nikki Bloom's incredible Keep on Growing song, all the juicy Range Revolution, luxurious, character filled, just want to touch it, put all of your precious things in. to carry it. We'll have a link to that, to our first conversation together. If you want to hear a little bit more of the Havstad Hat Co. and Casad Family Farms story, and to dig a little bit deeper into some of the circularity that you so beautifully weave, and all of the good things in the show notes. And I do want to encourage people to tell your favorite retailers and go seek you out on your tour.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun to imagine both of us on the road again this summer and fall, and in-person connection points.
I think it's going to change. We have to change the paradigm. If we don't like the algorithm, we got to do something else. We can't be complicit in the things that we don't want to see.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We can build something that's far more nourishing,
Yeah. Kate, thank you. Thank you for coming on. You're the best.
I want to hang out with you forever.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast. If what you found resonated with you, may I ask that you share it with your friends or leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts? This act of reciprocity helps others find Mind, Body, and Soil. If you're looking for more, you can find us at groundworkcollective.com and at Kate_Kavanaugh, that's KATE_KAVANAUGH on Instagram. I would like to give a very special thank you to China and Seth Kent of the band All Right, All Right for the clips from their beautiful song Over the Edge from their album The Crucible. You can find them at All Right, All Right on Instagram and wherever you listen to music.